Welcome, parents and professionals, to tonight's webinar about healthy lunchboxes for school-aged children. Thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Tran, psychologist, and I'll be your host for tonight's session. We're coming to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people and Bidjigal people. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of all the lands we're on and pay my respects to elders past and present, and to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with us tonight. This webinar is live and we'll be interacting with you through polls and activities. You can also ask us questions and share your ideas at any point by using the discussion forum, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. This webinar is best viewed on a computer or laptop, but you can also use other devices. If the video stops, try to refresh the web page. We're joined by Ben and Susan, who will be your moderators in the discussion forum. If you have any technical problems, please click on the red live support button at the top. Also, we want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and a link to that recording will be sent out next week to everyone who's registered. So keep an eye on your inbox. This webinar has been developed by the Parenting Research Centre and is brought to you by the Raising Children Network. We'd also like to acknowledge the support of the Victorian Government in funding this, which is why we're able to bring it to you at no charge. If anything discussed today upsets or concerns you, here are a few places that you can go for further help. raisingchildren.net.au has the numbers for Australian helplines and hotlines. It also has the number for Parent Line in your state. There's also Lifeline, which is a 24-hour crisis support line. And you can also visit australia.gov.au for more information. This webinar is best suited for parents and carers of children aged 5 to 12 who are wanting some information about healthy lunchboxes for school-aged children. It contains general advice. We encourage questions, though we will focus on the questions that could apply to more people in the audience rather than very specific cases. If you do have really specific questions about your children, please contact your local health professional. If you're interested to learn how to manage fussy eating, please see our fussy eating webinar on the Raising Children Network after this webinar. Okay, so we are hoping to learn a bit more about you and who's in the audience. If you haven't seen it already, there should be some polls on the right-hand side of the screen. If there are any issues with the poll, feel free to put your answer in the discussion forum instead. Now, the question we have tonight is, are you here with a particular child in mind? How old is this child? And the responses you can choose from are, my child is starting primary school. My child is in years 1 to 3. My child is in years 4 to 6. My child is in year 7 plus. Or I'm here as a professional. There's also a few follow-up questions as well. And we can see a bunch of people have already started responding, so thank you very much for doing that. We'll give everyone a bit of a chance to put some responses in there. And just a reminder, if there's any issues, just feel free to put it in the discussion forum on the right-hand side of the screen. All right, we'll give everyone a few more seconds before we close the poll. All righty, so it looks like the majority of people in the audience have a child who's starting primary school at 47%, followed by a tie between years 1 to 3, years 4 to 6, and professionals, all at 15%. And we have 9% of our audience with their children in year 7 or higher. Thank you everyone for filling that in. Let's introduce our speaker, who's Katie Marks. Katie is a senior dietitian working in a tertiary children's hospital. She has over 15 years experience working with children. She has experience across a range of pediatric dietetics and specializes in pediatric gastroenterology and liver transplant. Katie is also a mum of 3 energetic boys, so she understands the practical challenge of balancing children's nutrition at home. Welcome, Katie.
Hi, and thanks so much for having me here tonight. I'm really excited to be presenting this webinar and hope that people come away with some extra ideas for what you can pop in your lunchboxes for your kids. So here's an overview of tonight's webinar, and I'm hoping that you'll all find it informative, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So we're going to cover the nutritional needs of school-age children. What are some ideas of things to put in your school lunches and snacks? Some really, hopefully, practical tips and planning. And I was trying to think back to when I was having children starting school, what was helpful for me to know. Also some information about allergies, and then I'll also share with you some of the frequently asked questions that I get in my work, and hopefully that helps to answer some of your questions. And then we'll have some time with the Q&A at the end. So in terms of nutrition, children are not just little adults. So school-age children do have unique nutritional needs. These include things like iron and calcium, which are quite high for their body size. So, for example, children who are aged 4 to 8 years actually have higher iron needs than an adult male. So they have a need for nutritious food, not just food and energy in general. So kids do need energy to grow, but this needs to be from foods that are nutritious and contain nutrients and aren't just empty energy. And ideally, nutritious food should make up the majority of their intake. However, if you have a child aged 5 to 12, and I have 2 children in that particular age bracket, you will know they can be really active, but also really distractible. So they can get caught up in a game or chatting to their friends, and they easily miss those eating times during the school break. And another thing to consider is that although kids this age tend to be quite active, it is important to note that in Australia, statistics from the Australian Bureau of Statistics from 2022 and 2023 tell us that more than a quarter of children aged 2 to 17 years are overweight or obese, and 1 in 12 children live with obesity in Australia. So that's why it's important to offer fresh foods from the core food groups to give kids every chance to have good nutrition. So the Australian Guide to Healthy Eating gives guidance on serve sizes and how many serves are needed each day. The number of serves changes with age as children get older to match their changing nutritional needs. The serve sizes can be really helpful if you're wondering, for example, how many strawberries are in a fruit serve, or how much is 1 serve of vegetables. And there'll be a link included to this guide in the recording email, so you can view it in more detail in your own time. Kids need good food throughout the day to help regulate their blood sugar levels and provide them with the energy that they need to play and learn. Food at school can vary from state to state and sometimes even from school to school, but just generally what this might look like includes a morning snack. So this is sometimes called brain food or a fruit break or crunch and sip in a few states. And this will depend and vary from area to area. Then usually followed by recess or morning tea, then lunch. Some schools also include an afternoon snack. And if your child is staying at school for extracurricular activities after school, you might also need to pack them an after-school snack. So when we're talking about lunch boxes or packed lunches for school, we're really talking about lunch and snacks together. So although the school routine gives you the chance to provide a balanced diet for your kids, remember to go easy on yourself. So 1 bad meal or 1 skipped lunch can easily be made up for at another time. Kids do eat enough when they're offered nutritious meals and snacks at routine times. So this might not be just in a day snapshot, but if you're looking at this over a week or a month, this usually works itself out. So just the main message is try to be kind to yourself, because we're all trying to do our best as parents. A guide for what to include in a healthy lunchbox. So I consider these like the building blocks to a healthy lunchbox, and we'll talk about different examples from each of these groups along the way. So include some grains and cereals, some protein, veggies, dairy, and fruit. So this is good if you can just bring yourself back to think about these 5 groups and think about, have I included something from each of these groups in the lunchbox today? And what I'd like for people to do is, as we go, you can add in the chat any ideas or things that you have found worked well for your kids along the way. I know that, speaking to other mums and other parents of my patients, I do gather lots of ideas from other people. So it's good to use the brain's trust of who's here tonight. So in terms of grains and cereals, ideally we are aiming for whole grain based carbohydrates. These are easier, take longer for the body to digest, and are actually more filling than white versions, so white bread or white wraps or things like that. So with sandwiches, rolls or wraps, if you're making these, using a spread like a margarine or butter or something like that is optional. But if you have a child that is underweight and perhaps struggling to gain weight, a spread that contains healthy fats can help to boost their energy intake. Some examples of healthy fats that you could use as a spread include avocado, hummus, or a plant-based margarine, such as an olive oil spread. It's also better to add protein and salad to your child's sandwich than just a spread like Vegemite jam or honey, which won't fill them up as much over time. Things like pasta or noodles also can be included in the lunchbox. So you don't just have to have a sandwich every day. And noodles include things like noodles in a dish like a stir fry. We would tend to advise away from things like 2-minute noodles, just with they tend to be a lot lower in nutrition, higher in salt and fat. If you're looking at rice, you can include rice itself. You can include rice cakes or rice noodles or rice in sushi. Muffins or fritters, these can also be a great way to include some grated veggies in your child's lunchbox if they're not a fan of eating the veggies by themselves. And also crackers, so like some whole grain crackers, again, can be used as that grain product in the lunch. In terms of protein, again, any ideas that you have, please keep popping them into the chat there. So there is a focus on including protein to help your child feel fuller for longer and not come home like too ravenous after school and just eating everything in sight and raiding the cupboard. It can be easy to add protein to the cereal and grains part of your child's lunchbox. So for example, putting meat in a sandwich or adding some egg with a fried rice, or you're including some chicken or something with a stir fry. We do aim, where possible, to include fresh and unprocessed meat. So this might be something like some leftover meat from dinner, such as a sliced roast meat, some chicken breast, chicken drumsticks, some sliced pork or steak, a hamburger patty or some meatballs, or even like a barbecue chicken. Deli meats, which include things like ham, salami, mortadella, or processed meats like sausages and bacon, do tend to be higher in salt and fat than fresh cooked meat. So it's better not to choose these too often. Some other ideas of proteins that you could try include things like cooked fish or tinned tuna or salmon with some rice or noodles, some boiled eggs, some beans like baked beans or 4-bean mix, some chickpeas like included in falafel or hummus as well. And lentils, you can include them in patties or a pasta sauce or a curry or something like that. You can also include leftovers from dinner as part of the lunch. So you can include some cut up meat from dinner or bolognese or a stir fry or a curry. And you can use a thermos to keep these hot for school lunch as well, so they don't just have to be served cold at lunchtime. Right, now the slide here on veggies, we do include a few more ideas because this tends to be where families tend to struggle for ideas of getting their kids to eat veggies. We all know that veggies are really nutritious, but Australian health surveys have consistently shown that Australian children are not consuming enough vegetables. So the concept of crunch and sip, which has been implemented in Western Australia, then New South Wales and Queensland, after this National Nutrition Survey found that only 6% of Australian school children were eating their recommended serves of vegetables. So the idea of having that mid-morning snack is to actually include some extra veggies in your child's day. Veggies are particularly good to include for that mid-morning snack because it's often eaten in class. Veggies don't leave kids with sticky fingers or like juice going everywhere and a bit of mess like fruits can do. Also, we tend to see in practice that kids are very good at eating fruit because it's sweet and so it's, a lot more enticing, I guess, for them to eat. But they're not as good at eating vegetables. So including these at that separate snack can help to encourage them to eat vegetables. And it tends to be at a time where there's nothing else on offer, so they're not getting distracted by their other snacks or things like that from the lunchbox. Some children can actually eat excessive fruit. So the recommended aim is for 2 fruit serves and 5 veg serves per day as a general rule. Fruit serves do tend to be easier to achieve just from my personal experience working with children and seeing this a lot in practice. Veggies can be more challenging. So we've just included a few different ideas. So you can include some sticks of veggies that are things that are cut up into little sticks. You can include things that are cut up like cherry tomatoes or some baby corn or mushrooms. You can include whole edamame beans or snow peas. And grated veggies can be included for kids who find whole veggies a bit too challenging to eat. Or they don't like the texture as much, or it's too chewy, or whatever sorts of things they might be telling you at the end of the day. So grated veg can be included on a sandwich or a wrap. You can add them into muffins or fritters, or in cooking like meatballs, bolognese, or other dishes like stir fry or a curry, where they can be kind of incorporated into the sauce. So with dairy, we aim to include 1 serve of dairy in the school lunchbox. And again, dairy is a good source of protein for kids. So when we're looking at cheese, you can use this in sandwiches, or you can use it separately as a snack, like with some crackers. You can include plain or flavoured yogurt and then plain or flavoured milk. Where possible with dairy, we do try to aim to choose less processed options. So for example, like block cheese that you're cutting up versus a wrapped plastic cheese slice. The block cheese is obviously a little bit more nutritious there. And where possible, something like Greek yogurt, if your kids will eat it, versus a sugar sweetened flavoured yogurt. So the Greek yogurt has less sugar and is just that bit more nutritious. Australian dietary guidelines do recommend reduced fat dairy products. So that means less than 2 grams per 100 grams of fat content. But if your child struggles to gain weight, then including a full fat option can help to boost their energy intake as well. If you have a child that's allergic to dairy, there are dairy alternative products to all of these things that I've mentioned here, such as soy-based, oat-based, rice-based products. And just be mindful that anything that's based on almond or cashew products will not be able to be taken to a school that has nut-free as a rule. Drinks will be discussed in a few slides. Okay, so with fruit, we're aiming to include 1 serve of fruit in the school lunchbox. So this could be a whole piece of fruit, something like full banana, pear, mandarin, or orange. Cut up fruit, so things like watermelon, rockmelon, pineapple, kiwi fruit, or mango. Berries such as strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, things like grapes, and dried fruit such as dried apricots, dried sultanas, dried apples. There's like lots of different types of dried fruit coming out now. Just a note about dried fruit that we aim for the serve size to be no bigger than the size of a child's palm. So fruit does contain sugar, although it is a natural sugar. It just can be a little bit easier to overeat dried fruit because they tend not to be very filling and they're a bit smaller than eating the whole piece of not dried fruit, the normal fruit. So it's just important to bear in mind as well that fruit-based snacks that contain dried or concentrated fruit in large amounts, you may end up eating several pieces of fruit worth of sugar in 1 serving of those snack foods. So just something to bear in mind. Right, now packaged snacks. As a mum, I know that packaged snacks are realistically going to be part of most children's lunchboxes, but as a dietitian, I can suggest that you're mindful when choosing them and stick to a max of 1 packaged snack per day. These are optional, just to note here, you don't need to include a packaged snack, but I know that there is a lot of pester power with packaged snacks. So can I just reassure you, even if your child is telling you, but everyone has these at school, You can be fairly confident. Not everyone does. And it is up to you to trust your instincts and set some boundaries on what foods are and aren't available for the lunchbox. So as a parent, you're still in control of what food is being bought at the shops. So you're in control of what food is available at home and in the lunchbox. So with these snack foods, we have an emphasis on protein again to keep your kids satisfied. So without protein, they can be unsatisfied and overeat or be looking for another snack and another snack in quick succession. So with these criteria here, it's important to read labels and see what's in the food that you're giving to your children. If going and standing in the supermarket aisle is a bit overwhelming and you have other kids with you, we all know that doing groceries with the kids can be a bit of a nightmare. A good way to start is to shop at home. So have a look in your pantry, see what snack foods you currently have there and check if they're meeting these criteria, and then you can kind of go from there. Also, the major supermarkets have a lot of their nutrition info online, so you can look those up, when you when you get a spare minute. The other important thing to note is that we're aiming for snacks that contain whole grains. So whole grains contain fiber and other nutrients. And again, these help to keep you feeling fuller for longer. And whole grains also benefit your gut health. Calcium also helps to build healthy bones for the future for our kids. Also, usually foods that contain calcium have some protein there too, so they help keep your child feeling full. So with drinks, the best rule to remember is just water is the main drink. You can include flavoured milk as a dairy serve, but it should be a small portion, and it shouldn't replace water in the lunchbox. So when we say a small portion, that would be around 200 to 250 mils. And look, with flavoured milk, when we talk about this, when I'm talking to patients at work, people often say, oh, what about the sugar in flavoured milk? Isn't it bad for you? But I think when you look at what else comes with the dairy, so that includes other nutrients like your protein, calcium, B12, zinc, and other vitamins. It's actually a nutritious snack to include, and I'd prefer that to be included than a sugary something else or a packet of chips or something, which is probably going to be equivalent in calories but doesn't have those other nutrients packaged in there too. Okay, what are some things not to put in school lunchboxes? And look, I think this again will vary depending on what school you attend and whereabouts you are in Australia as well. So nuts, most schools do say they are banning nuts being brought to school. Some schools will ban other allergens, but that, in my experience, is not as universal as nuts. That's something that's at basically every primary school that I hear about. Some schools actually ban plastic and packaging, so they want you to pack everything in a lunchbox that can be washed up rather than packing things in all little packets and stuff like that. The only other sort of really dietitian-y rule that we try and have is that foods that are high in salt, fat or sugar that don't contain other sort of major nutritious components. So example, things like donuts, chips, chocolate, lollies, or fried snacks. These foods you might include just occasionally, but they shouldn't be included every day. So just as a bit of a guide there. So with choosing what to put in, just a few tips that I have for you. So simple is best, generally speaking. Like, we don't need you to be spending hours and hours preparing lunch. Sometimes it is just thinking back to those key food groups and making sure that you've got them ticked off. With the comment about sometimes less is more. So some kids like less is more, some kids like more is more. So some kids get completely overwhelmed by having too many choices or large portions, while other kids get excited about having lots of options and they can pick from what's presented in their lunchbox. So you'll get to know what's going to suit your child best, and you get to know, what they're going to respond better to. If you're getting your kids involved in the lunchbox, it might actually help with increasing their interest in the food. It's also a step towards building a bit of independence as well. So it gives them a bit of a sense of ownership over their lunch. So this could start simply with just giving a choice. For example, here are the fruit options. You can have an apple or a banana. Which one do you want? Or please pick from these two snacks. You can only have one in your lunchbox each day. This also prevents them just saying no. Like if you say, do you want this? No. Do you want that? No. Do you want that? No. It helps by giving them a little bit of choice, but only picking between things that you're happy for them to pick between, if that makes sense. So as they get older, they could start to pack more of their lunch. So they might even be choosing some recipes that you can make ahead, and they can help to prepare these too. So for anyone who's like early in the school days, like in that first year of school, that might sound a bit impossible. Like in the long run, you're going to hope that this ends up reducing the work for you. I'm not at this point yet, but I'm looking forward to the day that, my kids will start, helping with preparing their lunches. That will be great. Talking to your kids about feedback. So feedback can be valuable to take into account, and it might actually help you with packing things that they're more likely to eat. So as an example, my sandwich today was too soggy. This doesn't necessarily mean you have to listen to every bit of feedback. So if they tell you, I don't want vegetables in my lunch, or please don't pack me fruit ever again, you're not going to listen to that. But if they tell you something like, oh, Mum, you've packed too much food, or I'm really hungry and I didn't have enough today, it's important to listen and just let them eat to their appetite. So you're actually providing the food. They're kind of happy with the amount that you're packing. Another note is that it's okay to have the same thing every day, or a variation on the same thing every day. There's no pressure for an Insta-worthy lunchbox. I'm actually really glad everyone's here and not, scrolling Instagram. And hopefully I'm giving you some realistic guidance and not, putting these high pressure, beautiful lunchboxes that look like they're out of a magazine. You definitely don't have to strive for that every day. So in terms of neurodiversity, this is something that we're seeing more and more, obviously, in school-age kids in Australia. Again, similarly to what we said on the previous slide, it's okay if your child wants the same thing every day. We would ideally want to still aim for some variety, so still offering like one new or maybe different thing each day, just so that they have that opportunity to branch out a little bit if they want to. Particularly kids with neurodiversity can be quite sensitive to sensory aspects of food. So making sure the food isn't too messy or sticky or fiddly to eat. And including leftovers from dinner can be a good option. So if you know that there's food that they readily accept at dinner, then they could also be accepted at lunch. Okay, and the other thing you can do at home, but obviously you don't have that much control over when they're on the playground eating by themselves, is encourage your child to eat the main part of their meal first, when they're likely to be the most focused on eating and they haven't become distracted with, all the other stuff that's going on in the playground. All right, so planning ahead. I would love to hear all of the ideas that everyone has for this, for planning ahead, because this is something that I try and do, during my week. So for example, last night I've made 2 lots of lunches, and they're in the fridge in like their sealed containers, ready to go for one lot of lunch went today and the other lot of lunch is going to go tomorrow. So in the chat, please just share any lunchbox hacks that you have. Like, what can you make ahead of time? What works well in the freezer? What are some go-to things that, go into your school lunchboxes? So I guess my tips on making this as easy as possible is to try and plan ahead and shop for the week if you can. I know that is a pretty big ask, but if you are, planning ahead and you know that you've got all of the things that you need for the lunch boxes in the fridge or in the fruit bowl, then you kind of feel a lot more calm about it, and you can get through the week a bit easier than trying to duck to the shops after school or after work or things like that. It becomes a lot more tricky. If you're making and freezing things ahead, you can do that. So things like sandwiches can actually, certain toppings can actually be like made ahead and frozen. Otherwise, you can make batches of sweet or savoury muffins that can be, kept in the freezer and defrosted as you need them. So I'm not sure how everyone else's mornings go, but definitely this takes some stress out of my day by having the lunch prepared the night before, or as I mentioned, even 2 nights before, so that you're not trying to race around in the morning, get everyone out the door ready for school, and trying to make lunches all at the same time while you're dealing with breakfast and uniforms and all of that. The other thing is you can try and make some extra for dinner and use the leftovers for lunches the next day. You can also pre-chop like veggie sticks and some fruits and have them like ready to go in containers that you just can pop into the lunch boxes. And you might need to do a bit of trial and error to work out which fruit and veg are suitable for this. So in my experience, like apples go brown. You can put a few drops of lemon juice on there to stop them going brown, but it depends if your kids say, I hate the lemon. So you just have to kind of go with what's going to work for your family as well. Okay, now practical tips for lunchboxes. I was thinking down to like the very nitty gritty here. So if you've already started school, I apologize if you've already been through all of this thinking beforehand, but I just thought I'd include these tips so that you know what to be thinking about. So first thing, make sure your child's lunchbox actually fits in their school bag. I learned this one the hard way. My first child starting school. And yeah, had to revise the size of the cooler bag thing that I was putting in their lunch. And also to make sure that your child, particularly when they're starting school, like starting their first year of primary school, to make sure that they can open their lunchbox as well as any containers you're putting in, any packets of things that you're putting in, just to make sure that they actually physically have the skills to be doing that, because I don't think school teachers are wanting to go around to every kid in their class to try and help them open bits and pieces of their lunch. Label everything. I have currently 2 boys at school and can tell you that things will go missing. Sometimes they will come back to you if they have the label on there, which is helpful. Sometimes they also don't, and you have to just resign that is going to happen for some parts of school. Or maybe you have a very responsible child who's going to bring everything home. I don't know, but that's not been my personal experience. Also, including an iceberg in summer helps to keep your food cool, fresh, and appealing, so kids are more likely to eat them. In hotter areas, you can also pack the food in like an insulated lunch bag or even like a mini esky, like a soft one that fits inside their school bag. And that just helps to keep the food cool until they need to eat it. And the last thing is you don't need an expensive lunchbox. So as previously mentioned, things do go missing and you may or may not get them back. So you don't need to buy like a $50 lunchbox. You can buy something that is just as functional from, a department store that's a little bit more accessible financially. So I mean by that, the physical lunchbox doesn't have to be too expensive, as well as the things you put in it. You don't have to make it too fancy, and hopefully you're coming away with some realistic tips after tonight. Okay, so with allergies, the tips around allergies at school, I guess the main thing that's really important is to remind your child not to share food. So if your child has an allergy to different food and they're wanting to take something off their friends, they don't know what's in it. Often if it's not packaged, they can't read the label. So the other thing is that even with the very best intentions, other families who do not experience allergies will not have the same level of awareness and vigilance as a family who does have a child with allergies. So as an example, most people wouldn't know that pesto contains cashews or that hummus contains tahini, which is ground sesame. So if you have a child that's allergic to cashews or a child that's allergic to sesame, they could easily eat something from another child that the family might not realize they've put, nuts in the school lunchbox if they've included some pesto, for example. Schools may have the nut-free policy, but it doesn't protect children who are allergic to other things, such as dairy or egg or sesame, as I've said. The important thing to remember is that accidents might happen, but it is important that your child tells someone if they have eaten something different or suspect they're having a reaction. So make sure your child knows what to do if they think they're having a reaction. If your child has allergies, you need to inform the school. The school will require an ASCIA action plan, which will usually include medications like antihistamines and or EpiPens. This will also need to be provided to their before and after school care if they attend there. And it's a good idea just to make sure that your child knows about their ASCIA plan and they're familiar with it. And in terms of like treats at school, it's important to educate your child on what's going to be okay for them. So, for example, like lollies are very likely to be fine for kids with allergies if they're allergic to, say, nuts or things like that. But for other foods, you'll need to be careful in different circumstances. So, as an example, if you have a child who's allergic to shellfish, it will be fine for them to eat a cupcake. But if they're allergic to dairy, most other families aren't going to prepare a dairy-free cupcake to send to school. So most families in that situation will supply the school with alternative treats to give to their child with allergies at the times when other kids might be having treats that are brought in from someone else's home. Okay, so what happens after school? This is also an important part of the day. Children are usually hungry after school. This doesn't mean they haven't had enough to eat for the day. It just means they've used up a lot of energy and brain power over the day. If there are any foods left over from their lunchbox, it's a good idea to encourage them to finish off any food that's left in their lunchbox at the end of the day before they start, getting lots of snacks out. But if they really don't want to, you can move on because you don't want to make this a massive issue at the end of the day. So we try and get my kids to sort of eat what's left over in their school lunchbox first before they're having other afternoon tea. But, if it's Meltdown Central, you don't want to make a big issue out of it, and that's fine to move on. For afternoon tea, we usually aim to offer a substantial snack with some protein. So as an example, some fruit with yogurt, maybe like a cheese toastie, half a cheese toastie, a little meze plate with some cut up cheese, crackers, cherry tomato and stuff, or otherwise like a mini wrap with protein filling. Again, these snacks have protein in there to keep your child full so that they're not raiding the pantry looking for more snacks after this, because then that tends to run into a bit of a pattern of snack, 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 and then dinner comes along and they're not hungry because they catch up from eating all of that food in the afternoon. Okay, so we're now coming up to some frequently asked questions that I get as a dietitian working with kids. So what do I do if my child doesn't eat their lunch? So this is something that I really commonly hear. So just the first thing is you are not alone. I think most of the time the kids are just like too busy, too distracted with their friends. Someone's got a soccer ball, someone's playing handball, someone's, spilled a drink and they're watching what's happening. So it is very easy for kids to get distracted by other things, and they are sometimes just too busy to eat. So as a parent, it's good to approach this from a place of curiosity rather than a place of blame. So as an example of what I mean by that, so asking them, did you have a busy lunchtime today? What were you doing? Or who did you play with today? Instead of saying like, why didn't you eat your lunch? So which sets it up to be kind of a defensive sort of thing. It's also important to listen to your child if they say they're not hungry. So some tips you can try for this is to pack a bit less food. So they might actually be overwhelmed with options. You can include different options to keep things interesting. So like change things up with a bit of variety. Also helping to get them involved so they're helping to choose the food and the snacks, because then again, they feel invested in what's gone into their lunchbox as well. What if my child doesn't eat bread? This is another one that's really common. So we would advise in that situation, just try another source of whole grains. So it might be some crackers, something like corn thins or some whole grain Vita Wheats or something like that. They can have a wrap or a sandwich thin bread option. You can pair this with some protein similarly to a sandwich. So as an example, you might give some crackers with some cheese or some crackers with some cut up chicken or something that they can just sort of eat the separate parts. Sometimes kids don't like everything all touching as well. So So you can also have something that's left over from dinner. So they don't actually have to have bread to have a healthy day. And they can be eating some rice or pasta. It doesn't need to be a sandwich for it to be nutritious. You could include some sushi, like homemade sushi or store-bought, depending on how much time and brain space you have for all of that. Or having some savory muffins or fritters or something with some grated veg included as well. So there's plenty of options for children who don't eat bread. It just requires a little bit of extra planning and creativity. And then what if my child says they don't have time to eat their lunch? And this is also very common. This is really, really possible as well because kids can be distracted and run out of time. And again, it will vary from school to school. So schools sometimes will supervise children eating. So some schools will have like a 10-minute period of sitting down for eating, which is supervised, but others don't have this. Some schools will only have this supervision period happening in lower primary school, and it's relaxed for older kids. So some things you can try is packing some smaller things, packing things that are easier to eat. So as an example, like a whole piece of fruit or veggies rather than cut up in too many little bits. And adding several foods into one food. So as an example, including like a sandwich or wrap, adding in your protein, adding in your salad for vegetables, as well as your cheese for dairy. And then you've basically got like the majority of those food groups just in one sandwich, and then give them a bit of fruit for morning tea. So it's less volume of food to eat and can be done more quickly, which maximizes the chance they're going to eat it and still have time to play. So if you'd like to read a bit more about healthy packed lunches for kids, there are some great resources available. These will also be included in the recording email. And just here are some 4 key takeaways from tonight's webinar that I hope you'll be able to keep in mind. So the first thing is simple is best. There's no need to be perfect every day or have an Insta-worthy lunchbox. I hope that that's something that you will come away with from tonight. We're aiming to include nutritious foods from all the core food groups as the basis of the lunchbox. Keep offering that nutritious food, trust your child's appetite, and that their nutrition is going to balance out over a week or a month rather than focusing on one skipped meal or one bad day. With keeping things practical, making sure they can open their lunch, packets can be opened, food isn't too sticky or messy or fiddly to eat. And planning ahead can take some of the pressure off. So anything you can do to make the week run more smoothly is a win. So thanks very much for that. And Chris will take over now. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks so much, Katie. A lot of good info for us there. We've just got a couple of slides and then we'll jump into the Q&A section. So if you need to run early, that's completely fine. Please complete the feedback survey on the right-hand side of the screen in the handout section. This will help us make these webinars as helpful to you as possible. And a reminder that if anything we discussed concerns you or upsets you, there's a few places that you can go for support. And we've got another reminder that at raisingchildren.net.au, you can access recordings of previous webinars from preparing for birth all the way to parenting teens. Our webinars cover a range of topics like fussy eating, screen time, managing anxiety, and school refusal. So just visit the website for more information or to subscribe for alerts for upcoming webinars. Alrighty, so let's jump into the Q&A section. Thanks for putting in your questions so far. Feel free to put in more questions as we talk as well. So the first question we have, I'm so sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, from Gilsily. They're saying that they often see cheese classed as protein by some nutritionists. So their question is it good to offer both meat and cheese in the same lunchbox?
Yeah, so look, you can include cheese either as the dairy serve or as the protein serve. So it doesn't really matter. Cheese does contain protein, so it would be counted as a source of protein, particularly for children who are vegetarian, where they might not have meat or fish or things as other options. So to me, it doesn't really matter. Cheese is a protein and cheese is part of the dairy food group. So it can count across both of those.
Easy. Thanks for that. Angela asked if you have any tips for getting dairy in for a child who doesn't like to drink milk.
Oh, okay, yep. So other sources of dairy that don't include milk would include things like your yogurt, so like plain or flavored yogurt. You can include, again, cheese. That can be block cheese, grated cheese, cheese included in a muffin or in a fritter, something like that. So it doesn't have to be like really obviously dairy either if you want to hide it in a few things. And I guess like custard is probably something that I would say is, something again you might consider including, but again, it's a little bit higher in sugar than some of the yogurts and things like that. But yeah, there's other options in terms of dairy, not just milk. So they don't have to drink milk to have enough calcium from other sources.
Excellent. There's a lot of good ideas there. Misha, who's a teacher, asked if there's any helpful tips that they can incorporate into students' activities to get them thinking about healthy food in their lunch boxes.
Yeah, look, I think it will depend as well on what state and things you're in. Some schools have that included already in their curriculum. And it depends on what the age of the kids are that you're talking about as well. Some activities that I've seen, say for younger kids, where you're trying to get them to learn fine motor skills, might be that you get some catalogs from a local supermarket and cut out some of the healthy foods, or things that you might want to class as everyday foods, and be trying to sort them out into food groups or sort them into colours, like depending on what developmental stage the kids are at. If they're kind of like older primary school, you might do something where you're talking about the types of nutrients that you're getting from the food and how that fuels your body. So as an example, like calcium from dairy is important for your bones. Carbohydrates provide long-lasting energy to help you to run around and play, and protein helps with fueling your muscles or things like that. So sorry, that's a very general answer because I'm not a teacher, but I know that like just the scope of primary school varies from, kindergarten, we're learning to sit in a chair at school, right up to year 6, where they're obviously becoming a lot more independent as well. So it will depend on their age and stage with what's going to be appropriate.
Cool, thanks for that. And it sounds like there's some fun stuff in there as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to think. I think it might have been like school canteens or something like that may have some additional resources and Crunch and Sip. So I think there were a couple of links included that might be helpful as well. And when I was looking around for what's available from other hospitals and other states, each state almost of Australia has their own healthy lunchbox resources and information around. So have a little look.
Amazing, amazing. And this kind of ties into another question from Ashley. Ashley asks where to get examples of, a healthy lunchbox and the combination. So would that be the same resources?
Yeah, yeah. So there was some really fantastic, like really visual resources as well. That's helpful, to be looking at for families as well as kids that are wanting to learn about it as well. So have a little look around. There was a resource on Crunch and Sip from Western Australia that was really good, that had lots of visual, like building the lunchbox and a lot of the similar information that was included tonight as well, just in visual representation.
Got you. That's quite handy.
Yeah.
So Rebecca asked if there are recommendations for food from those different food groups that picky eaters are probably more likely to eat.
This is going to just vary so much. It's hard to answer, what's going to work for one picky eater doesn't work for another one. So in my practice, we see some kids only like white, crunchy, beige food, whereas other kids only want smooth, wet puree kind of texture. So I can't generalize advice for that. It's going to be really around what that child individually likes. The main advice around that, if they're really stuck on one texture, would still be to include at least one new thing or slightly different thing, even a slight variation on texture, so that they're encouraged to branch out, but you're not overwhelming them with all completely unfamiliar food in the lunchbox. So If you have a picky eater, they have a restricted range of food, you can still include their accepted foods, but just include like one thing that's slightly different that might just slightly challenge. You might be pleasantly surprised or it might be coming home, but it's that persistent exposure that increases the child's familiarity with the food, which then increases the chance they're going to eat it in the long run.
Thanks so much, Katie. Melissa asks if you have any suggestions for food that's more filling and more nutrient dense from some of those food categories.
Yeah, so look, the protein food really helps to keep you feeling fuller for longer. Which is why we do emphasize protein a lot throughout the presentation. So I was writing this with a few different hats on, thinking about, obesity management, trying to prevent too much snacking, but also knowing there's a lot of picky eaters and a lot of kids that might be struggling to gain weight out there. So trying to generalize a few things across. So protein foods are important for whether you're trying to limit too much snacking or you're trying to build your child's muscles up. Then you have the whole grain sources of carbohydrate. Again, those whole grains take longer for your body to digest, so give you a more sustained source of energy. And then, look, honestly, the vegetables are really nutritious, like vegetables and salad-based kind of foods, are really nutritious and more filling than having, say, just a carbohydrate or, something without protein included as well. So it's the combination of things all together. It's not like this one food is the one food that's really filling, but just making sure that you're balancing things out with those whole grains, protein, and veggies. And look, fruit is important in there too. And dairy, as we already mentioned, has some protein. So that's quite filling too. So if we're sticking with those sort of 5 key food groups that we talked about, you should be on the right track there.
Amazing, some helpful tips there. So Anna and a whole bunch of other people actually asked if you have any general tips to prevent children from getting bored of what's in their lunchbox.
Oh yeah, look, I think all the parents are probably echoing the same thing. Look, it's hard because kids do tend to go through bits of phases. Like, I don't know, my kids went through this phase of loving blackberries, for example. So I bought like blackberries every week, was putting them in, and then suddenly they're like, we're sick of these now. So you got to like move on to something else. My main tip for that is to try and keep a little bit of variety. Change up the fruit that you're sending, change up the sandwich filling or the type of carbohydrate that you're including. So it might be a sandwich, a wrap, or a roll. Like even just something basic like that helps to keep it less boring. And just try and keep some variety in there with the foods that they do accept. So if they want to eat the same food every day and they're happy doing that and they don't get bored, then that's fine. But if they're looking for something else, you just kind of need to keep trying a few different things and rotating through the foods that you know that they like so they're not getting too sick of the one thing. I hope that sort of helps. We're all in the same boat though.
Yeah. No, those sound like good suggestions. So Tara asks if there are some common tips that are helpful for children who have sensory needs.
Yeah, so again, this will depend because sensory kids can be sensory about all different things. It might be about color, it might be about the sounds on the playground, it could be about the crunchiness of the food. So again, I guess those tips that we talked about in terms of neurodiversity, like you're going to know your child the best and you're going to know what things they do and don't accept. So it's kind of, again, working within what they're accepting, but trying to challenge a little bit what they will have, so that they're still getting, hopefully, some foods from each of those core food groups. So the main thing that we see is that kids hate getting sticky hands. So anything that, say, as an example, sending like a whole mandarin that they have to peel themselves and all the juice like drips down their hands and stuff on their uniform if it's winter, like they hate that sort of feeling. And I think that's not just not just neurodiverse children. I think that's all kids don't like feeling sticky and yucky generally. So a way to combat that is to have the fruit like already cut up. If your child doesn't like getting their fingers sticky at all, sending a little fork so they can eat with it. If they're taking, say, yogurt, and they don't want it to spill in their lunchbox, you could send them with a pouch, or you could send them with, a spoon that they're able to use. So it's hard to answer that one super specifically, but hopefully if you're working within what your child accepts and able to challenge a little bit here and there, then, hopefully that's something that works for you and your family.
Thank you so much for that. Gabby asks, how do parents know how much food to put in the lunchbox?
Yeah, so look, I think with this, you're wanting to kind of trust your child's appetite. And, with what we sort of talked about, you're looking at the serving sizes that they need with that Australian Guide to Healthy Eating, which I mentioned towards the beginning. But look, most kids, if they're coming home with an empty lunchbox every day and saying, "Mum, I'm hungry," you could afford to put something extra in there. So it might be some extra vegetables or some extra fruit. It might not be an extra packaged snack, which might be what they're angling for. But, if they're coming home with their lunchbox untouched, or they've only eaten half of it, you're not going to put extra food in. So you kind of base it off your child and what they're telling you as well at the end of the day. So, if they're able to get through everything and they're kind of happy and satisfied, then, you've done enough. If they're not eating much of what's there, you don't need to be sending any more. So you kind of gauge it based on what's coming home and what they're able to tell you as well.
Yeah, so a few cues to look out for.
Yeah.
Cool. Amy asks if it's appropriate to introduce new foods in the lunchbox rather than starting it at home.
Well, I find in practice that kids are actually more likely to eat in a situation where lots of other kids are eating, because they like to copy other kids with what they're doing. So this is really common in the daycare years, which I know is not the target audience for tonight. But what we often see is kids eat really well at daycare, and parents say, "How are they eating all this stuff at daycare? They'd never eat this at home." But if you think about what's happening, they're presented with the food. No one's standing over them saying, "Eat this, have another bite." They're just being given the food. They're watching other kids and they're wanting to copy off their friends. So it is appropriate if that's going to work for your child and they're going to be happy to sit and copy other kids eating at school. But again, if that's going to cause them anxiety, you can introduce it at home. So again, you're going to know your child best. It's really hard to give specific advice to your situation tonight. But yeah, I find that kids, if they're going to be around other kids, do tend to eat a little bit better sometimes.
Thank you so much. So we have a question from a couple of people, Andrew and others. So they're asking if their child is dairy free or vegan or vegetarian. What are some suggestions for getting that protein and calcium in?
Yeah. So if you're dairy free, you can have the other dairy alternatives. So the soy, oat based and rice based products. As mentioned, I wouldn't be sending cashew or almond based products to school because they're nuts, and most schools are banning nuts. And in terms of like vegan and vegetarian diets, again, that's something that you may need to plan a little bit more carefully, just depending on, what your child is going to want to eat. So including the leftovers from dinner is a good way of including some of those nutritious foods in the lunchbox. And, include, it just depends. Obviously, vegetarian families, some families will still eat, say, dairy and eggs, and some families will even eat fish as well. So obviously then there's more protein options. And then if you're vegan, there are less options there. But you're still able to incorporate, different sources of protein in the lunchbox. It just might take that little bit more planning. So we often try and base it off what are they already having at home, or what have they been eating. Like if you've got a child starting school this year, what were they eating last year when it was lunchtime? Are you able to replicate that for school. So yeah, there's still ways of getting in protein. Vegan is a bit trickier, but yeah, definitely vegetarian and dairy free. You can use all sorts of different alternatives there.
Thank you so much for that. Let's squeeze in one more question. We've got one from Haley. She asks, what are some good food options for kids who are really active?
Yeah, so I probably can relate to this. My son is really active, he doesn't even want to sit and eat lunch. So yeah, like I was talking about towards the end, those um, foods that are like quicker to eat. So if you can incorporate a lot into a sandwich or a wrap or a roll or whatever they're having there, something that's quick and easy to eat, they'll tend to eat it a bit more than if it's something that's time consuming and takes too long to like sit down and eat. Um, and look, if you're including those whole grain carbohydrates and proteins there, that's helping to fuel their body over a longer period of time. So again, that advice is still the same for an active child. They just may be a little bit hungrier when they get home from school, or they may need a little bit extra in the lunchbox if they're still really hungry. But again, it will depend if they're active and not wanting to eat because they're running off to play, then you're not going to put extra food in and have it eaten. You're going to have it come home. So again, sorry, it's like you go off really the cues from your child. And it is important just to remember that lunch at school is like, it is important, but it's one meal out of the day. So there are still plenty of other opportunities to get in nutritious foods that kids need at other times in the day.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Katie. Well, thank you everyone for coming today, especially to our speaker, Katie Marks. Before you leave, please complete the survey in the handout section on the right. We hope you found this helpful. We've covered a lot tonight, so if you want to revisit this, keep an eye on your inbox where you get a link to the recording. The Raising Children Network also has a range of resources on this topic and others, so feel free to explore those if you haven't already. That's it from us. Happy feeding.